In our Facebook group, we took a small poll of the hiring practices for bilinguals. It's typical that there is some kind of bilingual or oral exam or interview, but we found that bilingual written exams are very rare. Is it true that if someone is hired as a bilingual employee, they should know how to translate written documents? Christy.
It depends on the position and the field. Definitely. So I know we've shared in our conversations that a lot of times if your bilingualism is just seen as an additional skill that you can in the moment help a client, help a customer, do a quick interpreting session between two people or just translate something quickly. A lot of times there's no one really assessing your level or your knowledge of that second language or maybe your first language. In my experience and in the setting and the world that I live in right now, which is corporate, I can tell you that the place I work for, we do, and as a hiring manager, it is a very extensive process as far as how we really make sure that those bilingual skills and those bilingual attributes that that person is, attesting to be very proficient at, we make sure we have a very in-depth understanding of what their skill set is really like. So in my arena, there is obviously an oral, several actually, interviews, whether it's initially by phone, and then we bring in to have an in-person interview. But there is extensive writing work. There's also translation, and I will talk a little bit about transcreation, which is really what we do in marketing, communications, all of anything that touches creative fields. It is transcreation, it is not translation, and that's maybe a new term for some of you. It's not a term made up by me, it's actually a marketing term. Might be very familiar with it. But I can tell you that as a person that hires bilinguals, bilingual professionals, the process that I go through is pretty extensive. We might have 60 applicants that have incredible experience as far as job goes and where they've been and where they've contributed, but that does not carry enough weight when we're hiring for someone that can actually create new content, reach new consumer segments specific to Latinx demographics in the United States. So for us, it's very, very serious and very extensive. A lot of new writing, a lot of product solutions. We do lots of original communications. We provide the problem in English and we say you need to solve this in Spanish. And there's a panel of people that go through the analysis of what's been provided. So it's different in every field.
I'm getting nervous already.
I know, yeah, I felt it. How does a translation, so as a bilingual employee, so thank you, and that comes from a specific editorial,
Yes.
art, creative,
Yeah.
marketing, communications. How about on the healthcare side?
No. No, and I will dare to say, not for any other system. The oral rendition is completely different than the written rendition. What happened is the word bilingual is being diluted in America. And some of our countries, like Mexico and other Hispanic Latino countries, when we talk about bilingual, we usually mean we can speak, write, and read. And in America, it's a synonym. Like we say bilingual, and they expect you to translate, and they think that you can read Spanish as well. And that's not the case, especially for second, third, and fourth generation Hispanic Latinos, that they can read at a third level grade or fifth grade level. For those that are first generation, this is easier for us because we are educated and got the grammar and the reading in our countries, and we have the advantage for the first and second generation Hispanic. That's why in your resume you should put first generation, second generation Hispanic, so we can start educating the system about the differences of different Spanish and different levels. That's what I ask in my interview. Are you first generation, second generation? If they don't know, as we speak, and I know where they're coming from, if they were brought here, if they were born here, if they went to school here, I can tell exactly what generations they are, and that tells me a lot of where that Spanish on the reading and reading skills should be, right? Because yes, some work will require you to write and translate some things, but that's why we have horrible, horrible translations in the community, right? Because you're being put in the hot spot because employers don't know no better, right?
So you're stating that putting native speakers not good enough on the resume? Because that's what I've put before. Like I know when I was first like fresh out of college, I was like fluent in Spanish and English or bilingual, but I started changing it to native speaker. But I like that point that you made of first generation versus second or third.
Yes, and translations has a different track of education. It's already established. It's a career. So if you're translating, you could be very good and not have a certificate of being translator from any educational entity. But we have a track, and for the most part, again, the demand is not helping standardize the business, all right? And that's why we have so many translators going into solo doing their own businesses because they can charge. Nobody is regulating that, right? You just get your LLC and voila, you're a translator all of a sudden, right? But because you come from it, I don't get me wrong. There's very first generation good translators because they have a background from the country they're coming from, right? And they can really well. They've been educated. They finish universities, and they have PhD and masters on their country of origin, and they have a real handle of the terminology here, and they can be good translators. But in America, it's a track for that, right? And what we say in our community, papelito habla. The more certificates, especially for you guys and young guys, they want to do the easy way. It's not an easy way to do this, and that's why that's why the market is so fluctuates a lot, right? And that we need to get a grip of that and tell our kiddos, you need to go to school to do that. You need to take class of grammar. Speaking Spanish at home don't make you an interpreter nor a translator. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I love that. And I want to say this real quickly. Make sure that we're always using, and we didn't mention this before, interpreter is speaking, translation is writing. Okay. Mary?
I was just gonna say, it's kind of a slippery slope, but sometimes, when you are the employee, to your point, they expect you to translate everything, 2-for-1 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility too, to tell our employer when you know that you're doing a disservice. Because I worked at an agency that wanted me to translate all this medical terminology.
Yeah.
And that is a very specialized thing. And I would say, I don't feel that this is the right thing for us to do because I am not a medical translator. And they couldn't get it through their head that that was a thing, And I found a translation company that specialized in that and we went that route. But for a long time, it was more like, you're just trying to be difficult.
Right.
You're not being difficult. You
Right.
know what you can do and what is right and what is wrong. And so that kind of falls on us. It's difficult, but that's part of our integrity, right? As a person, like I can translate some minor things for you for free, right? But when it comes to serious translation, you have to hire the specialists.
So, Courtney, I'm going to jump to you on the legal side because I want to hope that interpreters in a court system are not as easily asked to say, hey, can you write this for me?
Good question. Actually, it happens more than you would maybe expect. So 2 things. Number one, as an interpreter, whether in the healthcare system or the legal system, oftentimes you will be asked to do a site translation, which is, look at this affidavit, look at this charging document, look at these doctor's orders, and tell the patient what it says. So site translation is a skill that you can expect to have to use it as an interpreter. In the legal setting, I get asked to translate documents by attorneys when they want to send a document to their client, and it's not something I have to do. It's not something I'd have to do right there in the moment in the courtroom. I could say no if I would like to, but usually if I have time, I'll accept it and I'll go home and work on it and then email it to them because I feel prepared to do that. I'm sure there are interpreters who don't. In fact, I have a colleague who sends me her translations because she personally does not want to do them or doesn't feel competent to do them. So it's not required, but the site translation is, which is being able to look at a document and essentially give the meaning to the non-English speaker.
Christy, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the extensive vetting process that you have for hiring an employee. Um, so thank you for sharing that. I want to check in with Pepe. Or is there any other additional type of exams or testing that you've seen for checking proficiency?
Yes. So they're just proficiencies, and I used to be a medical interpreter too, so I know what those exams look like. I was a Truman interpreter actually, and there was a pretty serious, exam on terminology that was not. I don't think anyone in the room can just take the assessment and pass it really right now. Especially when it's a very specific terminology. But there are assessments like that. There are grammatical assessments, and there are also context and situational. But those really depend on the company that's hiring you or the organization, because they're very specific to the field that they, practice in. So.
And that would be, I would say, almost for an interpreter, right? So as an
And-
interpreter, they're
mhm.
checking for this type of terminology.
Yes, and as a translator, what happens is that if you have a history of being a translator, people want to see it. It should be part of your portfolio. So you should show, and this I have done, and I have provided portfolios to companies where I am showing the original piece that I'm translating from, and then I show my work. And so they can actually see how the translation, how the body of work came about. So there's that, showing
Showing your
your
work.
portfolio, your work.
Pepe, if we are not being hired, because there is, in the healthcare system, there are a lot of roles for bilinguals that are not interpreters or translators. Front desk, receptionist, scheduling, medical assistant. In the healthcare system, what type of proficiency exams have you seen for a bilingual? Not an interpreter, not a translator, but I say I speak Spanish and English and I want a job in all these different levels of healthcare. What type of proficiency exams have you seen or not seen?
I haven't seen much. However, it's progressing surprisingly fast. Employers are catching up, and this is due for liability reasons. People are suing organizations because they're horrible interpreters. And the thing is that organizations doesn't make that difference. They really rarely know what is the difference between a bilingual and an interpreter. Okay, they're trying to figure that out. Or communities don't know the difference. Okay, the first question when I used to be an interpreter was like, "How much you make?" Oh, it's nice to make that for speak Spanish. Yeah, often it's more complex than that, right?
It's not just about
Yeah.
speaking the language.
Yeah.
That's a given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I have seen very few assessments. However, there are organizations that they do that for you. And for example, I have found when I visit some organizations I work with in DEI, and they show me the language access, and I says, who is in charge of making sure that when you hire a bilingual, the bilingual has enough skill set? And they show me this other bilingual. And can you show me your documentation that how you assess these individuals? And they show me the test, and I check it, and it could be some are hard, some are lax, but then I say, who validates this? And then it says employee or bilingual staff, and it says it's not a validated tool. And this the business is growing so much that we have validating tools already in the market. It's just we need to the bilingual need to funnel it to them, because it's better that a third party evaluate the bilingual skills for you employee, so you have record.
Yes.
Okay, you have record of that. One I recommend for here is Alta. Alta is the one you use one of my one of my employers for a long time. With we decide that bilingual cannot be interpreters in many areas of the hospital, like you said, but they can be qualified to speak Spanish in a safe manner. You have to, even if you're bilingual, you have to have certain set of skills to speak to the patient. And those that are monolingual around you, let's say the doctor you're going to work with, and you're the I don't know, front desk individual. The doctor needs to be sure that when you speak to the clients, you have enough
Yeah.
skill set to speak to those. So you're disencouraged. And that includes cultural competency, basic lingual skills, and other skill set that you need to have to, to prove that you're a truly bilingual employee. And I recommend all that.
So, yes, there are some agencies that check for proficiency. Yes, some have some third parties. Yes, some have some extensive either court system, you know, your system where you're at. But you also mentioned that there is not always happening, right?
No,
So, if it's not always happening, checking for language proficiency, shouldn't I be happy that I got the job anyway?
yeah, probably you will be happy to get the job. The thing is, when the time comes to terms, like my friend here mentioned, and they go says, "Hey, great! Can you translate this document for us?" It's going to be very hard to describe it. And what happens, you're doing that disservice not only to your community but to yourself, and in some way you're lying to the organization that they hired for you, and you were lucky enough to answer the test that they put there, but you're really not equipped. That's why I say when you put in your resume, that's why I came here because I really believe the resume tells a story as far as that skill set. First generation, second generation, I have this experience. This is my portfolio. This is how much I know. To fit the job that you want to do, so you can do better. I'm not saying that you can improve, but you need to understand your limitations. My kids needs to know their limitations, and if they're gonna head to a bilingual job, or a dual role job, where I do some things, but I need to use my Spanish, sometimes in interpreting or greeting clients or whatever. You need to have some type of a class, or something that takes you not only the ethics of what you do, but the ethics to be a translator or an interpreter.
It's gonna come hunt you anyway if you're just faking it till you make it. I mean,
Mhm.
it is gonna come back. We're living in a very competitive landscape for bilinguals right now, and you mentioned this earlier, and you did too. I have come across, and with my agency and with my other work that I do, um, people that send me like, "Oh, we just made an update to this. Can you just prove it for me? I think you translated it before." And I look at the translated document, and I'm like, first of all, this is very poorly translated. I don't know who did that translation. I don't know what the source was. But I'm already coming to them saying, it's gonna cost you more money for me to revise it than work from the original. So if you're one of those, and I hope none of the people in the room are, who are just faking it, it's gonna come bite you back. And other things that I've seen are people that are not certified, or they're not really competent, but I see this in the work that I do. Oh, we have a designer, and she's from Miami and she's bilingual, and she created this visual merchandising sign for us. And I see it once it's been out to market, and I'm like, did they use Google Translate for this? Because it makes absolutely no sense. And it came back to that person, and the learning for there is for the person that was directing the project, or the person who handed out the translation, whatever the job was, because they did not verify that the person that they handed the work to was actually, had the skill set, had the level, was competent in what they were asked to do. So I would not fake it till you make it. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And there's tons of people that are, like Pepe said, actually certified, actually have the work experience, and the level to do the job. So just keep coming to these sessions, keep getting prepared, take the assessments, keep pursuing. We're lifelong learners. Nobody here is done ever. So I would definitely encourage people, if this is the field that you're interested in, if being bilingual is a skill set that you really want to leverage as you're seeking your opportunities, you have to make sure that you're competent in it. So yeah.
And I'll add, I agree with everything, and I would add one more piece. Kansas City's small. Word gets around.
Oh yeah.
If you end up doing some written or some oral work that is poor, because the way you said that, I would not want someone to look at my work and say, "Whoa, Celia, that's poor." We're a small town.
Yeah.
Words get around. People know how good or not good our work is.